Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Corporate HR Tries to Flex, Almost Gets Arrested by the County Sheriff. So at the time of this story, I had been working in search and rescue for the county sheriff for several years, having been certified by the federal government as an emergency services manager. My plant manager was very happy to let me go whenever there was an emergency that required my assistance, as I was a 10-year employee and a hard worker. Then my plant manager goes on vacation. I received a page declaring a local emergency due to flooding. This is truly a life and death emergency. I contact the plant HR and tell her I am leaving, not knowing the head of corporate HR is there and has the phone on speaker. Corporate GR proceeds to tell me if I leave it is job abandonment and I will be fired. I am actually in the plant that day only to assist in epoxying the floor. The plant is shut down for Christmas. I explain it is an emergency and the plant manager has always released me for emergencies requiring my presence. She stands firm, so I contact the search and rescue manager, who promptly says it will be handled as soon as possible. Within minutes I am called to the front office where the sheriff is on speakerphone. When the corporate HR lets him know I am present, he then states if anyone interferes with my going to save lives they will be arrested. He tells them he will be faxing them the relevant state law as well as a letter explaining my duties within search and rescue and a glowing review of my service with the sheriff's department. He explains that these will go into my personnel file. Corporate HR may have a degree, but apparently no common sense. She starts to tell him, well, in Denver. Sheriff cuts in to tell her we are not in Colorado, but she can take a vacation in county jail if she wishes. Needless to say, I was quickly out doing search and rescue duties. That was 10 years ago, but the corporate HR manager still shoots me dirty looks whenever she visits the plant. I just laugh. Next one is titled, Either Suck It Up or Leave, is not the way you want to address the person who's practically carrying the office. I worked in the service industry, well, to some extent, for about 2 years before the pandemic came. When I say, to some extent, what I mean is I wasn't really serving anyone. I worked in a department called back office, or BO for short. This is where goods come and go. Our department has two jobs, to check and to input. Therefore we called them checker and data. The checker's job is to make sure that all orders are eligible. This included quality and quantity. After a checker has confirmed the order, the data will then input the information regarding said order in the system, after which the merchandise is ours and will not be eligible for a return. Therefore our department was extremely important. The work was stressful and more often than not heavily supervised. We used to have 8 people working at full capacity during the normal days and barely managed to get by. There were weeks when we had to work overtime almost every day just to get everything running in order. Because of these overtime hours, we got paid more than other departments, nearly 30 to 40%. Of course, this sparked controversy. Other supervisors argued that we're using our workload to exploit the company. Mine was having none of it. There were audits, sessions, supervision from the higher office, and they found nothing. They even tried to bring in another crew from another store that's closely related. They quit as a whole after 1 month. When we got back in control, we even requested more hours to cover the crap that they had left behind. Eventually, the store stopped trying to change us. Instead, they tried to limit our hours. We used to request 2 or 3 hours on busy days before, but then even when the store was practically buried under mountains of goods, they only let us do 1, very rarely 2. We tolerated it at first. Normally we would stay past the requested hours to see things done. Not because we loved the job, God no, but because we're responsible workers, and if we didn't finish the work that day there were chances we'd get consumed by the flow of goods the very next day. But it was usually 30 to 45 minutes of those extra, 1 hour top. When the change happened there are days we had to do 2 hours extra with no pay. Yes, we should have said, "Duck it," to their faces, but my supervisor asked us to stay and he'd try to fix things. He's a super cool dude, and because I liked him very much, I agreed. The others weren't so cheerful, 3 left after a month, so we're down to 5. Our HC then was 3 checkers, 1 data, and the cool dude. Us checkers suffered, yes, but the data was on the verge of collapsing. She would be the first to enter the office, and usually the last to leave. Her shift was 8 hours, but she worked 12 or more every day. More often than not 2 or 3 of them were unpaid. We tried to share the workload with her, but we couldn't even cover our own most of the days. His objection to the work hours came to no avail. They were aware that we deserved those hours, so they simply ignore his request and response with something general. He's upset, it was July and the heat should not have come from the company as well. He requested a full audit, threatening to leave if things didn't change. They basically told him to either suck it up or go home. So he just left. He's the 3rd person they've hired in 3 years to manage that office, so they thought he's just as disposable as the others. What they didn't know was, he's the only reason I and Miss Data stayed. So when we knew what happened, we immediately noticed the HR that we'll also be leaving. They threatened us with penalties for unlawfully terminating our contracts because we hadn't given them 2 weeks' notice, but we laughed it off and reminded them that being the special department, the BO was given an extra 3 days off each year, which totaled in 15 days. Also, our contract stated specifically that if someone quit, they could choose to either use their remaining days off and leave early or get them converted into payment. They were so surprised when they found out that we all had our days off fully intact. It's almost as if we had been too busy to use them or something, I don't know, so they couldn't do anything about it. We then left the office with everyone eyes shooting daggers. Of course, everything plunged into chaos. Did I mention that we're the most important department in the whole chain? Because we were, and they found it out the very, very hard way. The other 2 guys managed to last a week before also leaving, citing something like, total madness, or absolutely out of control. After they left, the store brought in a team of 10, but they couldn't have covered half our work despite being twice in number. Honestly, I didn't care about it that much, but it's not something that flew by. There are days when their store had nothing on the shelves, so people started to go to the other store in town to shop. When they got things back to somewhat normal, it was after 5 months and the damage had already been done. They closed last month and the place is now rented to some small business. Not as interesting as some of these stories, I just thought about it when cool dude called me last week. We were still friends, I'm out of town but we kept in touch. Apparently, after the other 2 guys quit, they called him and tried to get him back to work, but he's a free agent then and said he was gonna charge them twice for consulting fees, not sure if it's a thing. Also, he would only work with us, citing familiarity to the environment, and if not then he'd do exactly as stated in the contract, which would be sitting around and ordering everyone to do their jobs. Seriously. He's supervisor, he didn't have to do anything, he helped us because we're head to toe in work and he's a cool dude. He asked if they tried to contact me after that. They never did. Next one is titled, How an N Cost My Company $65,000. I have been waiting about 2 months for this fallout in all its glory. I knew my boss would try to make me the fall guy, but I think I employed CYA well in this instance. A little backstory. I work as an office engineer at a mid-sized prefabricated concrete structures plant. About 3 months ago, our plant manager left spontaneously for a much higher-paying gig down south. Due to this, his responsibilities were distributed to whoever had capacity. I was put in charge of purchasing with the caveat that any purchase order, PO, over $5,000 had to be reviewed by that project's project manager. This was due to a mistake, due in part to my inexperience and in part my overconfidence, I made on an order which only cost us a couple grand, but delayed a project. Also due to lower labor costs, and the size our own steel shop, we have most of our large steel structures fabricated just across the border in Canada. Okay, on to the story. Our general manager is acting PM on a project which includes a large steel frame surrounded by concrete modules. I was told to get this frame quoted by our Canadian metal fabricator. I get the quote back, and throw together the PO. When I look back through the project specifications before sending the PO for review, I see our project has a Buy American clause, not Buy America as we had assumed. Almost all of our projects are Buy America and we are very familiar with it. This little N makes all the difference. Under Buy America, a Canadian fabricator can use American steel and meet every requirement. However, under Buy American, all steel must be domestic, and all fabrication must be done in the US. My GM was out of town on what was essentially a vacation to a project site we have in Hawaii, and was having none of my calls and emails marked as urgent. I informed him in a couple emails and multiple voicemails that we had to go to a different fabricator or the product would be rejected. I got an angry email back telling me to place the order immediately. I tried one more call in desperation, straight to voicemail, and then sent him over the completed PO with the Buy American spec attached, telling him this is well over my $5,000 limit, and I needed to get him to approve it before I sent it out. He approved it in less than 10 minutes, I sent it, and waited for the fallout. Well, it finally happened. Our product was delivered yesterday, and today the project owner sent over an inspector to make sure everything was done per project drawings. He noticed the manufacturer right away and told us he would have to reject the product, purely because it does not meet Buy American. In less than 20 minutes I was getting an earful from my GM asking me why this wasn't caught before we wasted over 60 grand on something that would clearly be rejected. I let him finish his rant, insulting my intelligence, threatening firing me, breaking protocol, the works. I asked him to pull up my emails from the order date, and showed him that he was informed of the issue, and my concerns were ignored. He didn't take this well and told me to get the hell out of his office. Oops. Now there is nothing left but to wait. Our project will be delayed at least a month, and the owner of our company is getting involved. I have the emails saved on a jump drive, at home, and the phone logs, while not recording the conversations, show that I left multiple voicemails on the same date, cannot be touched by the GM. Still a bit nervous, but I think I covered myself pretty well. Added in 2021, so I actually ended up leaving this company mainly due to poor management. I never really got in trouble for this, but my GM was always a dick to me afterwards. Next one is titled, "You've not ordered the offer anymore, so there's nothing we can do." Before the pandemic, my significant other and I were doing some shopping and decided to eat at a Harvester, a large chain here in the UK. It's reasonable food at the cheaper end of the scale, and okay when you're not looking for a posh dining experience or anything. There was a daytime, soft drink, salad bar buffet, main course and dessert, offer on which came to £30 for 2 people. A bargain, which we ordered. The food turned out to be pretty good. We made more than one trip to the buffet and suffice to say by the time we'd finished our main courses we didn't feel we needed the dessert, so I instead asked the server for the bill. The bill arrives and we have been charged an additional £9 for £39 in total. I query this with the server. Server. That offer's only valid with desserts, and you said you didn't want desserts anymore. Me. We intended to have the desserts but we're too full for them now so we don't want them, but I didn't expect we would be charged more? Server. Well, you've not ordered the offer anymore so there's nothing we can do. The malicious compliance you can see coming by now. Me. Well then I'd like to order 2 desserts please. You can bring them over, we won't eat them, and you can get the £9 knocked off the bill for us? At this point the server looks at me with a bewildered look and says she'll get the manager. My other half, who is more of a shrinking violet in these situations, is looking a little uncomfortable. A few moments later the manager comes over and asks why we don't want to pay. I explain that I do, but I don't expect to pay more for saving waste, but by all means to bring over the desserts and we will leave them there on the table when we leave. Comprehending this, she agrees to just charge us for the meal deal. Edit. Jesus Christ, Reddit, I get it. You would have requested the desserts to be boxed up and taken them home for later. The only dessert with the meal deal was ice cream. And regardless, we wouldn't have wanted to carry boxed up food around with us for the rest of the day. Next one is titled, No alcohol policy plus lenient work from home policy led to interesting solutions. Roughly 2 years before the pandemic, I worked for a company with a fairly lenient alcohol policy. In fact, at some company events, even on company property, they served alcohol. It was not uncommon for executives and managers to have a drink at lunch on a Friday and finish out the day. One day one of my employees went to lunch on his 21st birthday and had a couple of beers, and I drove him back into work to finish out his shift. He does basic computer input, has no contact with customers or operating machinery or anything dangerous. I got a note from HR that I need to give him a formal warning for what he did when they heard about it. I pointed out that there isn't a policy to enforce, and they decided to create a zero-tolerance alcohol policy based on this event. What they didn't understand was that they had 2 other policies in effect that we exploited. In order to make sure that people didn't infect the workforce, there was an infection reduction policy that allowed for people who called in sick after working part of the day to go home and get paid for the whole day. We could use this once per paycheck, every 2 weeks. There was another work from home policy that allowed for employees to work from home for half a day without needing a reason. We could also use this once per paycheck, every 2 weeks. After hearing about this zero-tolerance alcohol policy, I instructed all of my employees that if they were going to have a drink at lunch, that they should either call in sick for the rest of the day or work from home the rest of the day. Eventually it got to the point where we would have a drink at lunch every Friday and alternate work from home or call in sick. Drunkenness, after all, counted as a sickness to the letter of the policy. We called it Duck It Friday. Last one is titled, "We switched banks after they lost my dad's savings and tried to bill us for their mistake." Years ago we had moved from one state to the next. About a month ago, some lady had managed to find an old checkbook or something of my dad's and managed to clear out his entire savings. My dad tried to buy groceries and thought his card was broken. Went to order a new one, was shocked when he found out that all of his money was gone, and tried to clear it up with the bank. He said to me later that there should have been noticeable red flags when the bank going through that check. We were out of state. The check that the lady cashed was pretty old, about 5 to 6 years old, and my dad recently had a divorce about 3 years ago and had to make a new account. They required to check signatures, and I'm not sure how they managed to pass that. It should have been suspicious at the start since it was cashing out the entire savings. The bank apologized and said that the banker handling the situation will be disciplined, the police will be called, she was found and arrested later, and that his money will be returned in 2 to 3 days or today, and a $40 transfer fee was required. I'm not sure how the entire conversation went bust. Here is the breakdown. Dad: Why a transfer fee? Bank lady: That's for our policy, sir. Dad: I'm not paying for something you guys messed up on. I literally have no money, let alone cash. Bank lady: I'm sorry if we aren't up to your expectations at this time. Dad: Can you please talk to management and see if you can get it in by tomorrow? Bank lady: Hang on. My dad was put on hold for 30 minutes until he was put on the phone with a manager who wasn't much help. Dad: Trying to still be nice at this point, can you at least put in the money tomorrow? Manager: I mean, I can try, but that would still be $40. Dad: No. Manager: Then you have to wait for 4 days. Dad: I'm not paying for some idiot's mistake. Manager: If you don't like our service, then you're welcome to go somewhere else. Cue malicious compliance. My dad hung up and called me over to help him drive to another bank. He didn't tell me what he was doing after he made an account. When his funds were back, he transferred the money to his new account. Thanks for listening.